How far would you go for your dog? We chose method over drama. Lost dog search playbook in real life. Community board flyers and neighbor tips. Trail cameras at night and a humane trap at dawn. GPS redundancy and microchip update. Training and door latch fixes after the return. A grounded, first-person story that keeps to no chasing and brings him home.
At 3:12 a.m., I was face down on wet concrete, one arm threaded through a curb grate, my shoulder grinding against rust, while a headlamp cast a weak cone into the storm drain. Somewhere below, something metallic clicked twice the way a collar tag taps gutter stone. I counted to 10 to keep panic from making me noisy, then counted again because silence buys you seconds. A city truck idled half a block away with the hazards on. The driver had watched me wedge myself into a shape that did not belong to an adult with the job, then offered to wait as long as paperwork allowed. I had a plastic grocery chicken sitting open in a foil pan beside me and a leash looped around my wrist like a tourniquet. This was not a scene from a movie. This was how far I had come for a dog who had once slept through a thunderstorm on my chest like a sandbag with paws. His name is Rook. 40-something pounds of black and white question mark. Shelter special with a chest piece patch on his chest, soft mouth, soft eyes, a stubborn streak that likes rules better when he thinks he invented them. We met at a county shelter that smelled like bleach and Old Hope. He walked out, leaned his weight into my shins for exactly 2 seconds, and taught me how quickly a person's life can accept a new shape. Real life after that did not look like montages. It looked like cheap leashes that leave leash burns, boot print mud on January tile, scheduling shifts around midday walks, keeping frozen peas for both knees and chew-free ice packs, and learning which stairwells echo in a way his nerves do not like. The day he went missing did not announce itself with drama. It was a Thursday in late spring, first heat already arguing with the asphalt. A contractor came to measure the balcony door for a seal I could not afford to ignore before summer. The hallway gate that separates the kitchen from the front door swings shut on a magnet, always, except when a person who does not live there opens it wider to carry a long metal level. I was 2 rooms away when the level clinked, the magnet missed, and the door to the hall didn't latch fully against the jamb. The contractor apologized with his eyes, in that glance people send when they assume everything will be fine. An elevator dinged. Somewhere outside, a man tested a car stereo with bass loud enough to rearrange small thoughts. Fireworks had started early that week because someone nearby had a birthday and money to burn. Rook looked up, saw a rectangle of hallway he associates with walks and visitors, and made a calculation faster than I did. Open means option. The security camera by the elevator captured a blur that could have been any black and white dog in America. The footage gave me a timestamp and not much else. The back staircase door propped itself on a shoe someone had used for a smoke break earlier, and the door learned to be lazy. By the time I reached the parking lot, the patch of grass by the dumpsters held only the memory of pause and a circle where he had spun undecided for a moment before choosing distance. I walked the perimeter with treats and a tone a person uses when trying to convince their own lungs that air is still a thing. I circled the block until the circle became a spiral. A neighbor texted that he had seen a black and white dog trotting east with that purposeful head-low gait dogs use when they are trying to be invisible to themselves. The list of things a person learns in the first hour of a lost dog search is short and heavy. You learn that your voice wants to become a flare and must not. Running makes most dogs run. Yelling makes most dogs decide that you are a problem to outsmart. Chasing turns a game into an emergency. The internet calls it calm capture and recommends crouching, averting your eyes, dropping to the side, letting the dog circle back to the gravity that is you. It is excellent advice with a dog who recognizes the room you are building. With an adrenaline-lit brain and new smells stitching a map at street level, recognition works like a weak magnet. I filed the microchip report and learned that waiting for someone to do the right thing is not a plan. I called animal control and logged the lost report. They logged my anxiety with the patience of people who live on the other end of everyone's worst evening. I printed flyers at the drugstore, taped them under streetlights, and learned how many staples a telephone pole can drink before it stops caring. A woman in a minivan told me she had seen a similar dog near the soccer fields. A jogger swore he saw one near the rail line. A man at a bodega pointed west with his chin and said something about a black tail in a ditch. I ping-ponged between tips because hope drives poorly. By midnight, I had contour lines. Rook likes quiet routes, hates scooters, avoids crowded corners, and seeks wind where scent travels clean. The sightings formed a diagonal, creek bed to business park to a strip of scrub behind a warehouse with dumpsters that host late-night feasts. I placed a bowl of water where the scrub met the asphalt and tucked a worn t-shirt under a low branch, because everyone's favorite advice involves leaving your smell like a lighthouse. I set a cheap trail camera with a fresh SD card facing a gap in the chain link that something the size of Rook could treat like a side door. Then I sat in my car a half block away with the windows down to keep my face in the air and forgot how to blink. The first night I slept between the steering wheel and a bundle of flyers. Sleep is generous. It arrives even when you do not deserve it. I woke at 4:06 to the sound the creek makes when a rat argues with a puddle. Then at 5:11 to the train whistle that rewrites your brain for a moment. At dawn, the trail cam had a raccoon, a possum, 3 cats, and a streak that could be a dogtail or a ghost of a dogtail. I replaced the card and left a trail of rotisserie chicken skin like someone drawing a map for a shy god. Work did not cancel itself. I called my supervisor and arranged split shifts for the first 2 days, then gave up the pretense and burned time-off hours I had been saving for an answerless vacation. My apartment learned how to be empty of a shape that had made every room honest. The bowl by the door looked like a joke that had stopped being funny. The leash on the hook tapped the wall every time the air moved. My body hated the quiet so much, it turned the refrigerator's compressor into a voice. The second evening, a message with a grainy ring clip landed in my phone from a stranger 2 blocks south. A black and white dog sniffing at 11:18 p.m., moving like a person trying to remember a street name. 30 seconds, then gone. I moved the bait station south and set the trap I borrowed from a rescue volunteer, a folding, rubber-coated rectangle with a treadle in the middle and door that falls like a sentence when a paw presses the plate. Humane, effective, only useful if the dog is calm enough to make a mistake. My job was to teach calm to a knight. I learned how to talk to neighbors without turning them into scouts who would chase him on my behalf. I knocked with a flyer in a plea. Do not call him. Do not approach. Do not clap. Do not whistle. Text me if you see him and let him circle. Most nodded with that understanding confessional you get from people who have lost something once and do not wish that education on anyone else. A few scoffed quietly. One guy offered to bring his drone. I smiled without accepting air support.
On the third day, Animal Control left a voicemail. 2 independent sightings near the old tile factory, both within an hour, both describing the same patch on the chest. The factory backs onto a concrete drainage with culverts that disappear into dark where the city stores runoff and secrets. I walked the length of fence line and imagined being a dog who loved shade. I set another camera where the culvert meets the brush. I left sardines and chicken skin and my sense of dignity. That night, wind shifted. The city's heat lifted and floated. Sound traveled differently, long and thin, and carried the metallic click I had heard once at the dog park when Rook shook his collar in tall grass. I went to my knees at the culvert mouth with a headlamp and my breath in a fist. The chicken smelled like someone else's family dinner, and the creek smelled like pennies. Something moved in the dark, and then moved again with less uncertainty. The dog who stepped to the edge and paused was thinner by a margin my eyes hated. The patch on the chest cut the light into a shape I knew. He turned his head away from the lamp and then back again, the way he always asks permission to believe something good. I put my palm against the concrete and held still, because my muscles wanted to do the wrong thing, and stillness is a choice. I do not know if you have ever seen a dog decide to be found. It looks like doubt making room for relief. He placed one paw in the light and then another. The trapdoor behind my shoulder made an almost inaudible tick as the breeze nudged it. I watched him decide the rust would not bite him. He stepped forward, and the world reduced itself to 3 feet of concrete and a collar tag tapping stone. He was still 2 body lengths away when a sudden roll of thunder pulled a line through the night. The dog flinched, stepped back, and reconsidered his contract with this situation. He turned, slipped into the culvert, and vanished into the dark in a movement that erased hours. I stared into the concrete mouth until the headlamp made static behind my eyes. Then I moved, because moving gives despair a chore. I called the after-hours number for Public Works and left a message with cross streets and a polite promise to owe them something baked. I texted the rescue volunteer about trap position and bait and whether I should dare put the trap at the lip. She wrote back a single sentence, leveling me like a palm on a shoulder. Patience saves more dogs than adrenaline. At 3:12 a.m., the hazards on the city truck clicked like a metronome. The worker leaned against his fender, sipping from a thermos, bound by the kind of rules that keep public servants employed and the sort of compassion that keeps them up a little past shift. I lay on concrete with rain starting to pinprick and understood suddenly that the epic version of this story had never been about heroics. It was about endurance, lists, and learning not to chase. The headlamp beam trembled because my elbow had started to shake. I breathed like someone following a recipe. Something metallic clicked again below, closer. I loosened the slack on the leash and let the loop sit in my palm. Above me, the street stayed empty, and the chicken cooled in the foil. I waited for the sound of a paw choosing a surface. This was how far I had come. Farther was still ahead.
The next morning, boredom finally agreed to work on my side. Public Works returned my message with a sensible policy. No one goes into city drains for private animals, but they would schedule a grate check and warn me if storm volume made traps dangerous. Humane rescue volunteers had clearer marching orders. The rule was simple and extremely hard. Feed the pattern, not your feelings. I slid into the job the way people accept roles they didn't audition for. I made a triangle of routine: business park brush line at dusk, culvert lip at night, the scrub behind the warehouse at dawn. I refreshed water bowls and bait on a clock that felt like medication. I rotated smells, sardines, chicken skin, warmed hot dog pieces in a paper cup that fit under the lip and made the dark smell like a concession stand. The cameras filled cards with raccoons that think they own the night, cats with night vision eyes, one coyote that flowed past like a rumor, and 3 clips of Rook's chest patch reflecting like a small moon. In the 3rd clip, his gait had a hitch I didn't like. In the 4th, his tail hung low but not tucked. The rescue volunteer said this meant he was doing tours and returning to a center. The center was the culvert and the short run of brush where my t-shirt lived on a branch like a flag that only mattered to us. Work shifted around the search like furniture. My supervisor pretended to be annoyed and traded me for midweek opening shifts, then left a box of bottled water with the schedule board with a marker note that named no one and helped everyone. I bent my budget into a shape that could hold gas, bait, and a new power bank for cameras. Friends offered to help, and I gave them jobs no one sees on TikTok: printing flyers, checking the trap without standing in the wind line, DMing the neighborhood group admins to pin the post without spinning it into a party. False sightings teach humility. A woman waved me down on day 4 to tell me a black and white dog had been seen under the overpass. I stood under 4 lanes of traffic shaking chicken grease into the air while a trio of teenagers filmed everything for reasons known only to their algorithms. Nothing. A man insisted Rook was curled on a restaurant patio 2 miles away. The patio camera later showed a cow-spotted pit bull with a pink collar napping under a table while a server fed it fries. I learned to file hope in the right drawer. Good to have, better to label. Sleep arrived in pockets. I kept a backpack in the trunk with a toothbrush, a hoodie, a reflective vest stolen from my own job, a roll of painter's tape, a Sharpie, and a bag of dog food zip-tied to keep raccoons from staging a heist. The car smelled like dog and salt and the particular metal smell of trap springs. When rain came, I moved the trap back and weighted it with bricks. When sun returned, I put a towel over the rear half to turn the rectangle into a cave. I texted myself a reminder every morning to scan the trap before walking up because humans love surprises less than YouTube does. On day 6, the pattern narrowed. 3 pings from different cameras in a 2-hour window put him within a football field's length of my t-shirt branch. The third ping showed him pause and sit, the way he does to think. A sit means a brain has left the run channel. The rescue volunteer sent a thumbs up and a note, "You were close, avoid the culvert for a night, let the food station be the gravity." I hated the advice and followed it. The night felt longer without concrete under my chest. I parked farther away and watched a rectangle of darkness like it had something to explain to me. Midnight brought raccoons, rats, 2 cats, and a possum built like a bowling ball. At 1:47, the camera app tripped and sent a still so clear it hurt. Rook in profile, chest patch forward, ears soft, weight shifted toward the pan of chicken. The next still showed him a foot closer, then another. The fourth showed the trapdoor down and the pan tilted, nothing in the rectangle but bait and absence.
The spring had fired and caught only air. The treadle had clicked, the door had fallen, and he had not been inside the geometry with the plate. I felt the kind of frustration that makes people narrate their lives in a way that scares neighbors. I breathed like a person who has read at least 3 articles about patience. I reset the trap, shortened the bait distance half an inch, wiped the mesh with water to reduce the smell of failure, and went back to the car to bully the sky into getting to morning. Day 7 made my world smaller. I dropped the search radius to 2 blocks and measured wind at the culvert with smoke from a citronella coil a neighbor had given me. Then taped the coil to a stake to keep it away from anything flammable because adding a brush fire to the week would be greedy. The smoke drift told me scent ran toward the warehouse between midnight and 2. I walked that path marking imaginary lines like I was outlining a football play in chalk. Everything you do becomes a superstition after a week without a dog. The exact knot in the leash loop, the order of bait, water, t-shirt, towel, the way I folded the corner of the trap towel to leave a small entrance sightline that felt less like a trap and more like a haul. I recognized how silly it was and did it anyway because patterns help humans too. On the 8th night, a storm made the culvert dangerous. The city truck returned with cones and a polite suggestion from the driver to give the drain an evening off. Rook had been using that tunnel as a highway. I hated interrupting his map and understood that water would rewrite his map whether I approved or not. I moved the trap to the business park brush, staked it against wind, placed water that would collect some rain for flavor, and left the chicken in a shallow pan with a rock because I had learned the hard way that everything with fingers steals meat. At 2:09 a.m., the camera snapped him at the trap entrance with his nose in the towel corner. The next shot put him halfway in, weight forward, back feet uncertain. The third shot was blank. Then the door sat down on the frame with a satisfying square. The fourth shot was a blur of tail and panic. The fifth was the inside of a trap with the dog making the kind of calculations that require time and oxygen. I approached with the slow, bent posture everyone says is kind. He threw his weight against the mesh once, then again, then stopped to listen to his chest. I crouched a body length away and let my hands do nothing. He smelled like wet cardboard and creek stone and fear. He looked at the pan and then at my face. There is a moment where a dog's eyes leave the math and decide to read you like a book they have read before. Recognition landed like a second heart beating inside one chest. He lowered his head, exhaled once, and stopped being a trapped animal. He became my dog again. I clipped a leash to the trap before opening the door because excited mistakes are still mistakes. He stepped into the loop and then into my legs. The rain started convincing the dust to give up. I put a hand on his collar and felt bones I did not want to see. His paws showed a small bloodstain where road had sanded pads thin. He let me lift a foot and check, then leaned the whole shape of him into my side and sighed like an elevator that had made it to the right floor. We walked to the car in a shuffling duet that made the hazard lights look like applause. The city driver rolled by slow and pretended not to see tears because men who work nights know which moments belong to privacy. I loaded Rook into the backseat gently and sat behind the wheel with a hand resting on the part of his back that always feels like a question.
The vet's office opens at 8. The sign on the urgent care down the road lights at 7. I aimed for 7. We drove through a city that was just beginning to remember coffee. In the rearview mirror, a dog slept with his nose inside my sweatshirt sleeve and let the world remake itself. I had brought him back. The next question was whether I could keep him. The urgent care vet lives in a strip mall between a dry cleaner and a tax place that accepts walk-ins and size. The techs took one look at road-worn pads, a scuffed flank, and the edge of empty rib map, then slipped into the calm choreography that belongs to people who rescue more mornings than they ruin. Fluids, pain control, an antibiotic for a minor abrasion that would rather not turn itself into a story, probiotics, calorie-dense food, a cone as insurance against bad decisions, and a printout with a recheck date. The bill arrived like a second opinion on adulthood. I paid it because the alternative is a universe I refuse to live in. Back home, the apartment looked like a set for the life we had paused. Water bowl, leash hook, crate folded in the closet like a parachute we hope never to use again. I opened the crate quietly and lined it with the same fleece he had always liked. He walked in without bargaining, turned, and lay down with a sigh that seemed to inventory every mile of the week. I sat on the floor and watched oxygen succeed. The urge to talk out loud to the silence nearly won. I let my hands do the talking. Fresh water, small meals, a soft towel under paws that had done days of duty on the wrong surface. The next job was simple and humbling. Make it harder to slip, easier to stay. The hallway gate that had failed got a latch that bites and a spring that doesn't pretend. The balcony door earned a second lock. The leash hook moved closer to the door, so the transition from idea to gear asked fewer favors from chaos. I ordered 2 GPS trackers because redundancy had graduated from paranoia to policy. One collar carries battery A, and a monthly fee I resent less now. The other rides in a pocket for long walks in case collars decide to do what collars do in tall grass. I registered both devices on the apps and put the logins on paper in a drawer because phones die and paper is surprisingly dependable. I owed people thanks. The neighbor who baked cinnamon rolls to keep the apartment smelling like home instead of anxiety. The rescue volunteer who texted patience at 2 a.m. like a lighthouse note. The city worker who paused a truck in a way that, within the limits of policy, yes. I wrote notes that did not try to make the week profound. The fact that it was over felt profound enough. Then the other shoe. The property manager sent a letter using perfectly grammatical dread. Repeated references to recent incidents in and around the building, and insurance considerations resolved into a new pet policy at lease renewal that would require a liability rider, a refundable deposit, and official proof of a completed training program for dogs over 25 pounds. The words might as well have been printed on a bill. I drank water, forwarded the letter to my own email so it would not feel like a thing in their inbox, and started a to-do list that included class. The trainer I chose works out of a small warehouse with foam flooring and a banner that says nothing about magic. She believes in thresholds, leashes that don't slip, treats that are wages, not bribes, and the idea that dogs perform the map their body has drawn unless you give them a better one. We started at the beginning by choice, not because Rook didn't know sit, but because both of us needed a new shared language for distance and impulse. The first week we practiced looking away from moving things. The second week, we added human weirdness, slow bikes, a rolling cart, a person wearing a hood, a scooter 3 parking spaces away. The muzzle became a neutral object that meant work, not shame.
Neighborhood curiosity arrived like weather. People stopped, gestured at the muzzle, tilted their heads for permission to ask. I gave them the short version. Long week, lost dog, finding means management, muzzle for safety, not because he bites people, but because the world relaxes faster when it sees a label. Most nodded and gave us room. A few rolled their eyes like judges of taste. One man made a noise that suggested opinions about control. I practiced not educating strangers. I practiced being boring on purpose because boring is the highest safety setting. Landlord hoops turned into paperwork I could stack. Insurance writer? Attached. Vet letter stating vaccination status? Attached. Training enrollment confirmation? Attached. GPS serial numbers with an explanation that I value redundancy? Attached. A cover note that did not beg or get defensive? Attached. I asked for a meeting and brought copies on paper so the conversation could end with the sound of a folder closing. The manager read quickly, then slower. She confessed to having had a dog when she was young that ran once and never came back. Compassion walked into the room uninvited. The deposit stayed, but the sigh softened, and she said the stairwell paint job could wait until after our recheck. Money has been a theme so long that I almost forgot to mention it. The urgent vet bill sat next to rent on the spreadsheet like siblings who will fight unless you separate them. I sold a set of speakers I had convinced myself I needed last winter, when music felt like a method for breathing. I took 2 Saturday delivery shifts and learned which buildings tip in cash. A friend paid me to build a flat-pack bookshelf and pretend it was complicated. The tracker subscription dinged my card, and I smiled at my earlier self, the one who thought it was overkill. Rook healed by inches. The paws turned from raw to pink to tough again. His gait evened. His sleep went from crash to nap to the kind of deep, floppy snore that makes neighbors text laughing emojis. We reintroduced longer walks with a plan. Quiet streets first, park loops at odd hours, no crowded trails, no off-leash anything within a zip code of our route. I retrained myself, too. The door routine became a sequence. Clip tracker, check latch, pause for eye contact, leash on, step back, door open, wait, release. The wait is the difference between hope and habit. The old neighborhood group thread about a lost black and white dog finally drifted down the page. I posted a photo of Rook asleep on his back with one paw covering his face, and wrote a line about gratitude that did not take a victory lap. The comments filled with small hearts and bigger opinions about gates and contractors and responsibility because the internet prefers choirs to solos. I closed the app and threw a ball down the hall exactly 3 times because 4 makes him think we are going outside and routines are promises we try not to break. The training class graduation certificate lives in the folder with the lease and the insurance rider now. The piece of paper does not change him. It changes rooms we walk into. People nod at paper even when they do not believe faces. The property manager made a copy and came down to the lobby later to pet the air 6 inches over Rook's head, the way people do when they respect a boundary but still want to place their hand in a story. I kept the trap folded in my hall closet. The rescue volunteer told me to return it when my heart stopped feeling like it would run on the wrong days. I fixed the bend in the spring that had cost us a capture and left a note inside the folded wire explaining where the squeak lives and how to weight the door against wind. Someone else will need it this summer. I want them to be bored faster than I was. By month's end, our walks had calmed. We knew which hedges hide cats, which corners hide skateboards, and which yards pretend to be fenced. The collar beeped if we forgot to charge it, and reminded me that a 2-day battery is shorter than love. The hallway gate bit closed every time. The balcony lock stubborned itself against curiosity. It all looked like overkill until a kid on the 3rd floor propped the stairwell door with a sneaker for a pizza delivery, and I watched my dog watch the door and decide the sneaker was not an invitation. That decision was worth every piece of hardware in the house.
The question kept visiting in softer language. Friends would ask how I was, then tilt their heads toward Rook with that calculation people do when they are trying to weigh your sanity against your affection. I told them the truth without dressing it. It had been expensive, exhausting, humbling, and absolutely worth it. I did not tell them the part where lying on a street with my arm in a grate at 3 a.m. felt strangely like the most adult thing I had done in a year. The boring parts turned out to be the bravest. Setting the alarm for an earlier walk so we miss the scooter rush, skipping the busy trail even when the sky sells it for free, paying for a tracker instead of a better coffee, writing the property manager an email that sounded like a person who understands liability and wants to help. This is the training of both of us. It looks like nothing when you pass us on the sidewalk. It feels like everything when we get home and the latch clicks. Summer settled into the neighborhood like an aunt who brings iced tea and a schedule.
The ice cream truck restarted its song. Sprinklers learned the choreography of 6 p.m. Rook's fur grew back over scrapes that had made me memorize the map of him. The GPS app turned into a thing I glanced at for battery, not a lifeline I gripped. The trap went back to the rescue and left a quiet rectangle of space in the closet where a week of fear used to live. We rebuilt our routes with intention. There is a short loop behind the school with shade at the right times and a chain-link fence that keeps cats from declaring wars. There's a medium loop along the business park with loading docks that go quiet at 5 and guards who nod when we pass because they have seen everything at 2 a.m. and prefer uneventful nights. There is a long loop down by the river that we do only at dawn now, not because the trail owes us fear, but because I owe Rook distance from skateboarders and birthday fireworks that show up uninvited. Neighbors learned our pace. Kids wave and ask if he is learning today. Adults read the muzzle the same way they read a baby on board sticker, not as a confession, but as a request that everyone drive better near us. The property manager stopped me one morning to tell me a story about her childhood dog that ran once and came home with a face full of burrs and a new opinion about gate latches. We are all collecting gate stories. It is how a building becomes honest. Work steadied in the way work does when you stop asking it to be the hero of your week. My supervisor slotted me for early shifts because consistency is a currency. My side gigs shrank back into their right size. I learned to put $5 a week into a jar labeled "Dogs Do Things," and it turned out to be both a joke and a relief. The jar is not big. The jar is a promise. On the first thunderstorm of the season, I watched Rook listen to the sky and then look at me for whether the house planned to remember him. We did. We pulled the curtains before the first crack so the flash did not invent new shadows. I pulled the mat out and we did the routines that say, this is a room we own together. Nose target, down, chin rest, treat on the paws, release. He settled. The storm did not stop being loud. It stopped being a story about running. The landlord's conditions got renewed in the lease without fanfare. The deposit exists now as a line item that will probably come back to me if I keep vacuuming stairwell hair and being the person who reports the broken dryer belt instead of shrugging. The rider sits in a folder like a lifeguard with a book. The training certificate lives beside the vet records. None of it was cheap. None of it felt optional after a week that taught me how expensive luck can be.
One evening in August, a woman stopped us near the field behind the school and asked if I was the person who had posted about the black and white dog months back. Her face did that thing where recognition tries to apologize for not helping earlier. She told me her nephew had lost a dog last week, and she had sent him the screenshots of my routine. The triangle patrol, the trap towel, the bait rotation, the part about humans being boring quietly. She said the dog came home on day 4, hungry and fine. It felt like someone had mailed a thank you to my future self. The only time the old fear tried to step back into the room was on a Sunday morning when a teenager propped the stairwell door for pizza again and left it. The sneaker wedged under the door looked like a trick question. Rook looked at it, then at me, then sat without being asked. I clipped the leash before we approached, nudged the sneaker out with my foot, let the door close until the latch bit, and breathed like a person who appreciates hinges. Nothing happened, which is the most beautiful ending a day can write. I don't pretend this turned me into a better person. It turned me into a person with lists and a willingness to be publicly ordinary. I used to think how far would you go meant miles or cliffs. It turned out to mean bedtime at 10 because dawn walks are safer. It meant learning the names of 2 public works employees and writing them at the top of the thank you note, because gratitude works better when it is spelled. It meant leaving the park early when someone arrives with an off-leash grin and an essay about socialization. It meant selling things I liked to buy time I needed. It meant accepting that the bravest version of love is often a plan that bores everyone but the 2 of you. If you want a measurement, here is mine. I went as far as learning a city's drainage map by smell. I went as far as lying on concrete at 3 a.m. with my hand in a grate and a leash looped twice around my wrist. I went as far as spending money I didn't have on tools I hadn't known existed,
so a dog who trusts me would have fewer opportunities to make bad choices. I went as far as talking to strangers about door latches, like I was running for office in a district where only hinges vote. Mostly, I went exactly as far as ordinary. I got very good at it. Ordinary is the farthest distance no one claps for. The mile that returns you to your own door with a dog who glances up to check whether you are the same person you were on day one. I am not. I am slower, more deliberate, and weirdly proud of owning a reflective vest. At night, Rook sleeps the way he did before the week went long. On his side, hind legs twitching when a dream tells him to run on a lawn he remembers from a summer I owe him. The collar tracker blinks on the dresser like a tiny lighthouse, reminding us that land exists. The hallway gate catches every time. The balcony door gives up its secrets to two locks that mean it. The jar on the shelf has enough for a vet tech smile and a handful of high-value treats. The trap's borrowed wire rests in someone else's closet, waiting to make their week both worse and better. There are still fireworks sometimes. There are still off-leash dogs in the wrong places. There are still letters from offices that have to protect themselves because the world is litigious and tired. There was also a dog who chose to be found and keeps choosing it, a human who learned how to make boring look like a superpower, and a city that for one long night put on hazard lights and waited while a small story decided it wanted the easy ending. How far did I go for my dog? Far enough to make the distance back home shorter next time. Far enough to turn epic into ordinary on purpose. Far enough to stand in a kitchen and watch a leash hang on a hook and know what it cost and why I would pay it again.